I'm Hodan Addou. I'm UN Women Country Representative for Tanzania.
So this year, the United Nations is reaching its 75th anniversary. What is the significance of this 75th anniversary to UN Women? And maybe you can let us know what it means to you and the triple mandate that you have.
Yeah, thank you. For us, this year is a pivotal year for the UN, celebrating 75 years of the United Nations. It's a milestone, it's a celebration for all of us, not only for people who work for the United Nations, but for all the countries, all the people. Particularly for us in UN Women, 2020 is such an important year because it is the year 25 years ago where hundreds of women all over the world had gathered in Beijing in 1995 together with governments, including Tanzanian government, civil society organizations from Tanzania, and other individuals from all over the world to agree on the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So 2020 is a pivotal year for advancing gender equality. It's also a pivotal year, as you said, for the UN. And this landmark document that was signed and agreed upon by the world demonstrates the global commitment for advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in a transformative way. So as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the UN, we also need to take into account the progress that we have made together with our governments, with our civil society organizations, in the realization of those international commitments that we have agreed to. And I think as we reflect on the 75th anniversary, we need to also take stock on all of these achievements. What does it mean for the advancement of gender equality? In particular, what does it mean for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal, particularly Goal 5? So as we're reflecting this year, we also need to look at the progress that has been made here in Tanzania, as well as in all over the world, for gender equality. We need to see how that progress, that review, that process of implementation of these Beijing Platform from Africa, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action shows progress, but also it shows what are the gaps. You know, as our executive director states, she says that no country has achieved the gender equality, and that she calls what I find it really interested in. She's saying is that our best has not been good enough, meaning that there's so much that we still need to do to help countries achieve their commitments and so forth. But for Tanzania, I think there's a lot to celebrate, and the UN in Tanzania has a lot to celebrate for achieving and aspiring to achieve the commitments that were set forth for the Beijing Platform for Action. And I think for us, we need to look in particular to see that in Tanzania, we have progressed very well in terms of the representation of women in parliament. Tanzania has over 40%. That's an incredible achievement. And of course, this achievement is due to Tanzania, but I think as the UN here, we've helped some things along the way in terms of supporting capacities and so forth. But as the UN, we need to also help Tanzania to achieve the Africa commitments for 50-50 representation. We need to also support efforts to ensure that poverty does not have a woman's face or a girl's face. We need to ensure that women and girls can inherit land, can have equal opportunities for education, for employment, for decent work. And also, I think most importantly, we need to together make sure that we are promoting better sharing of unpaid care work. And that's something that together with the UN and its partners can be helping to achieve the country to move forward on these achievements. The other thing I think it's important for us to take stock of is that with the UN and Tanzania, I think this review, this reflection of the 75 years of the UN, it helps us also to understand that we're not alone, that it's no longer just the UN and governments. We need to look for multi-sectoral partnerships, private sector, religious leaders, traditional leaders. We need to look at women's organizations, community-based organizations, and see how we can collectively come together. We need to also double our political will and expand and reinvigorate our commitments to helping the women and girls of Tanzania to reach their highest potentials. And I think this anniversary of the 75 years of the UN, it also gives us this urgency, what the Secretary General is calling for the decade of change. There's a sense of urgency that we need to help countries move forward in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And without gender equality and women's empowerment, there's no way that we could achieve those goals. So there's this effort of this sense of urgency that we need to accelerate efforts. We need to double our partnerships with private sector, get more domestic resources as well as international resources to support progress for women. And as we've always have said, progress for women is progress for all. So this 75 years of anniversary is that reflection. Where are we in terms of gender equality and women's empowerment, not only here in Tanzania, but also globally? But I think if we reflect hard enough, we can say that we've done, we've achieved some major progress, but we need to do more. We need to accelerate and try to establish much more inclusive partnerships and make sure that the goals for 2030 are achieved for all women and all girls, so that no one is left behind because of their gender, because of their geographic location, because of disabilities or other characteristics. So this is really a celebration, but it's also a wake-up call that we need to make sure that 75 years later from now, when we're not here, that we had helped and contributed to the progress of gender equality, women's empowerment in Tanzania. And in that process, it included all stakeholders, that it's all the voices, all the concerns, and that we need to ensure that the regions that have the lowest levels of gender inequality are targeted, that we need to look much more deeper with data, with analysis, but also with efforts that bring in this private-public partnership as well as the support for the United Nations. So we can't do it alone to really help us to accelerate these goals. And it's really this multifaceted efforts. But we need to make sure, where are we short in terms of the goals that we've met, and where do we need to put in these efforts? For UN Women, we have our mandate is very broader. And that's why it's so important. So as we celebrate 75 years, we're celebrating 10 years of UN Women, celebrating Beijing, a platform for action. We're also celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. And this is something that we're trying to support the government to achieve in Tanzania. And for us, this 10th year anniversary is really to see, where are we? Because UN Women has a special role. We have a triple mandate. One is to support and coordinate the UN system in helping them to achieve gender equality. So together with the UN, when we support the United Nations, we support the Resident Coordinator's Office and the United Nations system here in the country level to achieve these goals and to make sure that collectively as the UN, we help the country, Tanzania, to achieve these goals. So for instance, the UNDAP, the United Nations Development System Frameworks has strong gender equality goals and targets, and we very much work with the resident coordinator to ensure that the UN system is meeting its goals. So we're at the moment establishing with the RC a gender coordination mechanism that is chaired by the resident coordinator. We're working closely with the UN system here, for example, with OMT, to ensure that issues of inclusion in terms of gender parity are addressed, in terms of the level, the ranks of women in Tanzania, both national and international, have that opportunity to be in high-level positions. So we're looking at the parity in terms of where are women in that. And that report goes to New York. It's part of the Global Secretary General's report, as well as capacity buildings, gender analysis, trainings, and so forth, and helping the UN system move forward. So I think that is an important contribution that we do. It's a mandate that was given to us by the General Assembly. The other area that we're working on is to look at global norms and making sure that we're helping the country to achieve these international norms, and looking at policy reviews, making sure that the gender policy is up to the international level, helping the country to review gender inequality laws and legislations that might be conflicting in the Constitution and so forth. So there's a lot of processes that we're looking at. And then at the same time, we also have specific programs that will help the country to achieve this sustainable development goals. We have programs on women political empowerment and leadership. We have programs on women's economic empowerment. We have programs on eliminating violence against women and girls. We also have, support to the government in terms of making sure that the government system delivers for women, ensuring that the structures of government are supporting the gender policies and the international commitments that Tanzania has signed up to. So there's quite a bit of support, for example, reviewing 5-year development plans, the Muskusa 4 now that's being developed. How do we make sure that women are not left out, that the targets and the resources and the budgets are there to support women and girls' advancement, as well as also other issues on statistics and data. So whatever that we do is really to support the government of Tanzania to achieve its goals, but also to help the country and its partners, especially the women's movement, to have a strong contribution towards the achievement of these goals. Because UN Women, when it was established by the General Assembly, but its founders, there was a movement, global movement of civil society that asked and lobbied governments that we needed to have an entity that was strong enough to be the voice of the voiceless, the voice of women in development processes. So we were established actually by the women's organizations who lobbied their governments, and through that lobbying, we then we were established by the General Assembly. There's a specific resolution that we have. So we have also, we work hard to support the women's movement, so that we have a strong women's movement that holds government accountable, that their voices are there. They also have the capacity to address the issues, at the country level, regional level, and so forth. So we have that strong alliance with the women's movement, unlike some of the other agencies. But we very much work with the UN and help the UN to deliver on the UNDAP and also the other commitments that we have. And another important area for that is keeping track of the progress and so forth. So we work with National Bureaus of Statistics, we work with the Ministries of Gender and so forth to help them when they're reporting on various norms and conventions, like the Convention on CEDAW, for example. We help the government to prepare those reports. We also keep track in terms of data and analysis by strengthening the gender statistics of National Bureau of Statistics and also its counterpart in Zanzibar on OCGS to make sure that we are tracking progress. Because without the data, we will not know, have we reached the Sustainable Development Goals? Have we reached Goal 5 for Tanzania? And that's such an important important information that we need to constantly ensure that the data is there. Another important point is for us that, as I said, it's important that we have to work with private partnerships. We're now expanding our partnerships and trying to establish larger partnerships with the private sector, with what we call a multi-sectoral approach towards the achievement of gender equality. So we're also working with the Bretton Woods institutions, for example, like the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, IMF, to ensure that we help them as well through a partnership, that the resources and the funding that is going to Tanzania is also done in a way that is looking at proper analysis on gender budgeting. So there's a lot of expanded partnerships that we're hoping that we're going to have with the World Bank and with the IFC. We're also trying to expand partnership with the private sector in terms of how do we make sure that we leverage the resources. There's an interesting program that we have that's called the WEPS. It's the Women Empowerment Principles, and we're trying to get private sector companies to sign up on those principles that looks at fair employment, addressing sexual harassment in the workplace, looking at maternity leave and so forth, but also looking at, as I said earlier, as we looked at gender parity issues in the UN, we're also through the WEPs looking at where are women, how many CEOs are in Tanzania, private sector companies and so forth, how many are looking at hiring more women and more women to hold senior positions in government, in the private sector. So we're expanding that partnership. We're trying to also expand partnership with the media, and that's something that we're starting. We're hopefully we'll have this very interesting initiative that's called Unstereotyped Alliances, to make sure that with media houses and large advertising companies, that they portray women in a positive way, that women can lead, that women can, take up positions of business and so forth, and girls, should be encouraged to have proper mentorship and so forth. So what I'm actually saying is that in order to ensure that we help the country to achieve gender equality, we need to have many partners, not only within the UN, not only with the government, not only with civil society, but also expand it to the private sector and other influential groups like the traditional leaders to combat discriminatory practices and so forth. So it's really, it is a celebration, I said, but I think we need really to bring in multiple partners so that we can then address the call for the Secretary General, as he said, that we don't have much time, that we need to really accelerate our efforts and bring in multiple partners to address these issues so that after 75 years, we're not talking about the same issues, that women are not in leadership, girls are still dropping out, there's high pregnancy rate, there's high levels of sexual violence. We need to move on, but then we need to put in this sense of urgency that together we need to achieve these goals.
Has the narrative changed from, in terms of the economic empowerment of women in Tanzania and their participation in economic activities?
I
Has
think
it changed within the last 20, 15 years? And how would you say you have
yes,
impacted
yeah.
that within the last 10 years?
Yes, I definitely think it has. I think definitely the policies that have been established have definitely contributed to having more women in the economic sector. But I think in Tanzania, what we need to take note is that the majority of the women are in the agriculture sector. So in order for us to make an impact, we need to look at key issues that are driving that sector. And if we don't invest in the women who are feeding the nation, agriculture is the majority of the women are in the agriculture sector. We need to ensure that they have the resources, they have the tools, they have the financial resources, the information, and so forth to ensure that they can improve and help them to have higher incomes and so forth. But I think, there's the SME policy. That's where you also see women. Majority of the women are in the informal sector, so the government has an SME policy. They also have a women's economic empowerment program that they're very much looking at it from a cross-sector perspective. But I think in order for us to move forward on women's economic empowerment, we need to look at other factors. We need to make sure that women and girls do stay in school, they have the skills, they have the education and the resources to enter these important sectors and so forth. But there are definitely opportunities that are there, but there are so many other factors that are still, I think, preventing women to reach their highest potential, whether it's on issues of land, property, collateral, but there's many systems that are in place. There's many opportunities. A lot of the banks in Tanzania are providing services, programs, and packages that are attracting women because they see that at the end of the day, women, it's business, smart for them to target women and so forth. They're the ones who are making decisions at the household level in terms of they have the purchase power, and they're the ones who are actually telling, what is bought at the home and so forth. So there's quite a number of investments that are coming in. I see that several of the banks that we're partnering with are trying to bring in more women to have issues of financial inclusion, which is the biggest, I think, factor, because a lot of that is tied to collateral, and many of the times women do not have collateral. So they're looking at very creative ways. Several of the banks, the large banks, are looking at those type of opportunities, and we're looking at that as well. We're also, for example, during the COVID period, we were partnering with some of our partners, and who, especially like the Tanzanian women chambers of commerce, women traders who are doing cross-border work. A lot of their work was affected because of the border closures of COVID, and many of them had to come up with innovative ways and giving them, technology, basic iPhones and so forth, so that they can market their goods. They can also try to find out latest information on the the market value of products that they're selling and so forth. So there's so many things that we need to take into account, and because majority of the times women are at a disadvantage economically, as well as social cultural factors that are preventing them from achieving their goals. We need to make sure that if we empower women economically, they will then have those other opportunities to achieve higher goals, but also better well-being for their families, for their children. So with additional income and so forth, women, we know, that spend most of their resources for the welfare of the family, for healthcare, for education of their children, and the basic well-being of their families and their communities. So I think there has been progress, to go back to your question, but there's still a lot more that we need to do, especially on issues of land rights and inheritance, and other factors that are preventing women from accessing financial resources and inclusion. And that's something that we're trying to do and work with multiple partners, but we're now engaging much more the private sector and see how their impact, their partnership can have a bigger impact for the small resources that we have. Yeah.
And,
yes.
The he for she campaign, do you want to say how successful it was?
Well,
and also the gender
The gender scorecard is for the UN,
Okay.
and it's looking at, specifically for how are we delivering on for the United Nations. But they are, we are looking at various gender mainstreaming efforts. Like now, we had this really interesting partnership with the Office of the President to look at women in the public sector. So together with the President's office, and then I think it's called the Public Sector Management Department or something of that sort, to make sure what type of guidelines we could have to ensure that there is parity in public sector in terms of appointment. I mean, they even looked at how do we make sure that we have, a room for young women to breastfeed their children and so forth. A small room in some of the ministries and so forth. And it's something that I think, for example, in Parliament, they're also looking at that. So there are so many opportunities that we're trying to capitalize on. And I think the beauty of Tanzania, because I've served in so many countries, is that it's a country that is truly, committed to the UN. And truly committed to UN Women's mandate. Because, I remember the late, God bless his soul, the late ambassador, the former Minister of Justice, Ambassador, Doctor, Minister, former Minister, late Minister, Augustine Mahiga. He told me that when he was in the UN, when UN Women was being established, that Tanzania was one of the strong advocates for its establishment. So he sat, incredible as it was, he said that he sat in the General Assembly and he made sure, and Tanzania made sure, that UN Women was established. So there's this history of relationship between UN Women and Tanzania. So for us, it's been such a good partnership with government. So when we're advocating for a gender policy or a gender marker within government, or making sure that the agricultural sector has strong gender indicators, or now the 5-year development plan has strong targets and resources for gender and so forth, it's not a struggle. That's why I think it's such an interesting thing. So we've come a long way, and that it's not a struggle. So Tanzania, or even the UN in Tanzania, is really lucky to have that partnership, because we have the same goals and aspirations, the strong constitution and the rights and respect for individuals that Tanzania has. It's so important to move forward. But of course, there's all these challenges on culture and so forth. But I think it's that relationship. And if I could encourage you, I hope you will have an opportunity to meet with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and get their perspective, because it's a country that really believes in the UN system. And so it hasn't been a hard sell, because it's part of the values of inclusion, of leaving no one behind, that every individual has a right for a better life. And that's, I think, the beauty of Tanzania, irrespective of their gender, their location, everyone has that right. And so this celebration, it's really it's a celebration for Tanzania. And for UN Women, 10th anniversary, it's our celebration. It's together, yes. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.